Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way.
Breakthrough News, and this is the Freedom Side. I am one of your hosts, Eugene Puryear. And as always, I am here alongside my intrepid co-host, Rania, Khalek, but in real life, actually, this time, not just virtually. Good to see you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm in person today.
Reach out and touch someone.
What's
here, as
up?
They say. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
For us, it's important. I don't know if for those anywhere else it matters, but for us, it's a
I don't know.
difference.
Let us know in the comments. What is your preference?
Good thought.
Although, wherever I am, I'm still the same me.
That's true.
But it probably does look cool to see us in the studio together, I imagine. It's a nice studio.
It is a nice studio.
Love the
It's a
blue.
rare
It complements my very reddish purple hair that I...
Shout out to the Breakthrough team. Makes it possible. Does a lot to set this up. Makes it happen. And I think we've got a great set for you, just like we've got a great show for you, as we always do.
Been a wild week.
A lot has happened this week,
Yeah.
although I feel like that has just been the theme for 2025. It just keeps on giving, as it were. Good and bad.
It's giving.
It's a lot happening. I feel this is... it's not going to be your normal end of the year. I think it's probably not over yet. And not to mention here in the United States, we're still in the midst of a massive government shutdown. And airspace is actually going to be shutting down more significantly over the next few days. They say on Friday, major air traffic going to be reduced 10% across 40 different major metropolitan areas. So a lot of wild things are happening, in many different fronts. Wow, I'm now going off on all these tangents thinking about planes. There's that super tragic explosion of that plane in Louisville. A number of people killed there. Still have to figure out what that was about, but seems like the plane might have been too old. But either way, a lot happening. Zohran Mamdani won the mayoral election of New York City.
We're gonna be talking about that. You and I.
Talking about that.
And I think it was for those who missed it. We did a live stream.
Yes.
From the official election rally. Interviewed lots of the dynamic cast of people. So if you missed that, you can go check it out. It's all on our YouTube channel. But also, Eugene, if you are not already, you can go to patreon.com/breakthrough news. And if you become a patron, you can watch the full HD version of our live stream from the official Zohran Mamdani rally in Brooklyn, New York, on, was it Tuesday night?
Tuesday night. We
spoke to lots of people. Jamal Bowman, Hassan Piker, Letitia James.
Hey, listen, it was a party. No doubt about that. But yeah, you paid all that money for that high definition TV, so you might as well go ahead and watch the high definition version. And
generally speaking, you should become a member of Breakthrough News if you aren't already, because that is how you keep this program and others like it, this channel, that's how you keep it going and growing. We do it with your support because, we're not getting money from Pfizer. And we're not getting money from Lockheed Martin. So the next best thing is our viewers. So we can maintain our independence, keep telling you the truth about wars and tax cuts for the rich.
Yes.
And also it helps us come up with a plan to push back against whatever is happening with our YouTube numbers over here.
Indeed.
And also one more thing before we really get to our guests and stuff, Eugene, I just want to remind everybody, you need to smash that like button. It helps boost us in the algorithm that hates us. And also make sure you're subscribed to Breakthrough News. Make sure you hit that bell so you can get notifications whenever we do put new content up. And if you haven't been seeing our content in your feed, please leave a comment letting us know if you haven't, so we can show YouTube those comments. Because I don't know, for those who follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen I've been on a bit of a crusade about whatever is going on at YouTube. I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence, Eugene. Maybe it's just a coincidence and suddenly everything we were doing became wrong for the algorithm. Or maybe there's something going on where someone at YouTube doesn't like us. So either way, smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe to Breakthrough News. Make sure you hit the bell so you get notifications. And again, patreon.com/breakthrough news. And also, if you do become a patron, you'll get a notification in your email every single time we have new content. That way, you don't necessarily need to be relying on the YouTube algorithm that hates us to send you our content in your feed.
Yes, just a quick addendum. I think the bell is gone. I think now you actually have to hit the down arrow.
I see a
turn your
bell on
notifications
mine.
on. Okay,
Look.
well, I've been told many different things. You have to hit the down arrow next to the bell, and you have to turn on all notifications. I've been told.
Yeah, all.
I really don't know. As
Or
you know, I do
personalized.
not
I
actually really
feel
watch a lot
like
of YouTube.
don't
so
listen. No,
probably-
you can hit the personalized one and then it just sends you. Anyways.
Okay, well, Rania, here's what I'll say. She's going to do a tutorial for you if you donate $10,000. So how you can make sure you can get everything.
Yeah, I'll do
all
a
the
personal. If
time.
you donate $10,000, I will do a personal YouTube
tutorial.
tutorial for you. That's 100%.
She'll even
true.
throw in Instagram just.
Yeah.
for the
And
money.
I'm pretty good at Instagram.
You are pretty good.
Oh
at
God,
Instagram.
someone at Instagram is watching and they're gonna start suppressing and throttling my account, which I know Twitter's doing as well, but it's to be expected.
As long as you
Seriously,
throttle hers, not mine. We're
This
all good.
dictatorship
Meta.
of the algorithm. I mean, I gotta stop like losing sleep over it, but sometimes I do because it makes me feel real gaslit.
Well, let's move on.
Yeah.
Because we're
Wow,
not helping
Eugene
our
does
case
not
here.
care about my
it's-
OCD about
well,
social
you
media.
know, listen, it's not to say I don't care, but you got to put everything in its proper place. And also, by the way, shout out to Free Speech TV for making it possible for us to come to you on that platform as well. But we want to turn to our first story here now, and this is one that is very relevant to the entire country, as it were, and that is this wave of massive data centers that are being built. And in particular here, as it concerns Prince George's County, Maryland, where there is a very significant grassroots effort to block a very large data center coming in there, at least to make sure that if it is brought in, it's brought in under the right types of covenants that the people in the community would like to see. And we are very, very honored to be joined as we continue the show by Taylor Frazier McCullum, who is an organizer for Landover, Maryland, and from Landover, Maryland, who helped kick this whole thing off. Taylor, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's great to have you, and it's a great story about how grassroots activism can make a difference. PG County, where you are from, a lot of people who are from the sort of DC area know it. It's the most, it's a well-known African-American locale in this country. Data centers are now, the new trend that the government is pushing forward here, and I think this is something that seems to be happening a lot as it concerns these data centers. That there's a lot of Black people there, a lot of poor people in general, Native Americans. So I wonder if you think that part of why this data center is being sort of foisted on Landover, Maryland, is because of who lives there and how they are perceived by big business.
Yes, we have almost 1 million residents, close to 950,000 residents in the county. And of that, it's 60% about is African American. So it makes us feel like we're targeted all the time because way back in the day, it was the highway coming through Landover. Then we got, FedEx Field being built, which is now, I think, Northwest Stadium. And now they're trying to propose a data center in our community. So it's like, when are we going to get the right end of the stick instead of the short end? So I just feel like it's unfortunate that for us to have such a high population of African-American and Latino residents that they want to push this on us when they didn't even give us opportunity to know that it was coming or, hear about it other than in the news after the deal was already done. So it's very unfortunate.
And can you tell us a bit about the process that the county has used to try to get this data center installed?
Yes, so back in 2021, the county passed a bill that would fast track data centers. And a lot of the council members now are regretting that decision now that we've started to speak out, unfortunately. But that was done in 2021. And then in 2024, the Landover Mall site was approved by the planning board. So they offered a moratorium to us in Prince George's County recently, back in September. And so that means there's a 6-month pause on data center approvals. But as I previously said in other interviews, that's a bit performative because the Landover site was already approved in 2024. So the pause doesn't affect the Landover site if it's already been approved, So that's kind of what the council is doing. They put together a qualified data center task force, but it's a very biased task force. It doesn't include representatives from many environmental agencies or organizations, and they haven't been privy to any presentations by EPA or Maryland Department of the Environment on the effects that the data center will have on our community.
I'm glad that you mentioned that people have started to speak out because it really has been a groundswell that have seen that on multiple levels, online, in person. We're seeing some of the images to my left here on the screen. I had the opportunity to be out there with you all in front of one of the before one of the task force meetings. Unbelievable turnout of people. So just talk about what the community reaction has been and what kind of organizing is going on.
Yes, so back in June, I started a petition on change.org to help stop the data center from being built. And then I got linked up with the Party for Socialism and Liberation around August, early September. And we decided to do an Instagram reel on the harms of data centers and how it would directly impact the Landover community. Once that reel went out, I mean, it went viral. We're currently over 300,000 views. I think like up to 350,000 views on that one Instagram reel right now. And the petition has received over 21,000 signatures at this moment. So it's taken off, like you said, like a wildfire almost. Everyone is very excited to be engaged in the process now. We've had a qualified data center task force meeting on October 25th that just passed, where the community was allowed to speak, but only by force. We had to stand up and kind of request by chanting, "Let us talk," that they gave us a opportunity to be heard, because other than that, they were just having us write our thoughts down on Post-it notes and on pieces of paper. And we knew that wasn't going to be given directly to the council. So we're hopeful that this project will be stopped because of the amount of community pressure. But then that leads us to now have to fight these fights in other places in our community, because we know that whatever AI company is behind this, which is not disclosed currently, is going to try to put it somewhere in our community. So we're going to pivot, and we're going to keep fighting these hyperscale data centers.
You know, it's so interesting because when we talk about in the past, like the coal plants, the nuclear facilities, these sorts of places being placed oftentimes in poor Black, Brown, and Native communities, oftentimes what you'd hear as the argument would be, oh, no, this is like a big money maker. It's going to help facilitate jobs, create jobs. It's going to help the local economy. So we're hearing similar arguments being made now about these data centers. So what do you say to the people who will argue that this is going to be a moneymaker for your community? It's going to help create jobs for you and your family.
Well, Landover specifically has almost 25,000 residents. Our unemployment rate is currently around 7%. If you look at how many jobs the data center is going to bring to the community, it's not going to be a drop in the bucket for that 7%, because it's going to be highly skilled jobs that are going to require you to have certain degrees or knowledge prior to that. Even if you go through a training program, when the data center is built, you still wouldn't be eligible for the job because they want you to have work experience. And if we look at the case in Memphis with XAI, right now they have Colossus One, and that is a 22-acre facility, so a quarter of the size of the Landover facility. And it's only employing permanently or long-term up to 300 people. So that may sound like, oh, that's great, 300 people got jobs, but at the end of the day, how does that look as far as it relates to the overall unemployment rate? Like, if we're not bringing in thousands of jobs to the community, then to me, it's not worth it to sell our clean air and clean water for the benefit of just a few in the community. And that's if they give those jobs to community members, because if there's no community benefit agreements or agreements made by the county that jobs have to be specifically given to residents, then those jobs are oftentimes going to be outsourced and remote jobs.
Well, Taylor, let me also ask you this, and you mentioned the different efforts that are going on. Insofar as there may be people watching in the PG County area generally, and they're thinking, wow, this sounds terrible. What can I do? How can I get involved? Is there any particular place they should go?
Yes, you can follow at No Landover Data on Instagram. You can also come out to our community meetings at Bladensburg Library. We're going to have another one this coming Saturday, November the 8th, from 2:30 to 4 p.m. And then you can also sign the change.org petition, or you can even follow PSL DC Instagram page. They have a lot of information on our fight and ways to connect to our movement there. And then we have an email list that you can sign up for. I will try to see if I can drop that in the chat. I'm not sure how to do that, but I'll try to get that to you guys so that you can maybe send that out. But if they sign the petition, then they'll get automatic updates every time we send out about a community meeting or an action that we need to take place.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll get that out to people. Don't worry, I don't know how to use any of that stuff too. But this is really amazing to see, and I think in a great story, starting from just an average everyday group of people to really taking over so many different spaces in the county and pushing back. Taylor Frazier McCullum, organizer from Landover, Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Yeah, Rania.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important story, not getting very much attention. These data centers, and they are everywhere. I think I saw someone in the comments say that where they live in Northern Virginia, there's more data centers than there are Starbucks, which says a lot. There's a lot of Starbucks in Northern Virginia.
I believe Loudoun County actually has the most data centers of any county in America or something like that. I read it's got like 300. And this is actually in Prince George's County. What they're saying, they're like, oh look, it's all working out for Loudoun County. And of course, when you go out there, people are complaining about all sorts of things. But yeah, I think there's two elements to it. One, I think people don't even fully realize, I mean, there's so many different aspects. One thing that I actually learned from Taylor and others about the land, about all data centers, but also just in regards to Landover, is that they actually have a sound. They make like a hum. So that's a lot of times why they put them in the middle of nowhere, because the closer you put to people, it's like serious noise pollution, and it can really, the lights and the sound mess you up. But then the other factor that everyone has been talking about the past couple days is the AI bubble bursting, and how there are so many different signals and signs that you've got this, we talked about this a couple weeks ago with Michael Roberts, this sort of self-referential, you got hundreds of billions of dollars, which is basically like 4 companies investing in 4 other companies, and all the different investors piling into those companies and all hoping that's going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, it's going to collapse. And a lot of the money that's being spent is to build out these data centers. There's all sort of reasons why they're doing that and all these different things. But it could end up that you could get this data center, you could build it in a place, the AI boom could totally collapse, and they'll never use it.
Yeah.
And so then you've built this whole thing, you've spent all this public money, all these other factors, and then all the jobs and everything they promise never comes to fruition, and it becomes just like a closed strip mall, and it's just a big building that's sitting there. So it really is it's an unbelievable scenario, but they're being built everywhere in the country. And it's really they make you think it's because, your phone, everyone sees how we're using more apps, we're using more this, but they're building out way more than they need based on bets of things that may never happen. And it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And by the way, just for people to know, according to the Federal Reserve, not Eugene Puryear, the U.S. economy has $24 trillion in what's known as runnables, which are basically assets that could go down if there's an economic crisis. And when you look at like Apollo Management, which does a lot of this AI investment, they're mainly investing retirement funds. You look at what the Fed says are 2 of the areas that are the most dangerous: money market funds, so people's savings, and life insurance. So an AI collapse could be bad all across the board. It could be a total economic collapse, but just think, even if it's not a total economic collapse, it could wipe out millions of people's retirement savings, regular savings, and their ability to get a life insurance payout if there's a sudden death in their family. So, I mean, the impact of this could be very significant.
Definitely. And before we move on to our next guest, one thing we didn't get a chance to do in the beginning, because I was complaining about the algorithm, which I'm going to keep doing, is we forgot to kind of give a rundown of the other topics we're going to be covering on our show today. And I realized looking at them that a lot of them are quite Israel-centric, in the sense that, we're going to be speaking shortly to our next guest about the big sarcasm quotes, air quotes, ceasefire in Gaza, or not so ceasefire in Gaza, and new related updates. Also going to be talking a bit about a very interesting topic that we haven't really addressed before, so I'm excited to, and that is this kind of fissure inside the Republican Party among the right when it comes to the issue of Israel, and how to maybe understand that from the position that we're in on the left, and how to engage with that or how not to engage with that. And then we're going to be discussing the case of Sami Hamdi, a British journalist who is currently being held by ICE because of a far-right campaign against him in this country, despite the fact that he had a valid visa to enter the country, to go on a speaking tour to talk about the genocide in Gaza. Just outrageous story. We'll be having someone who's talking about that. And then we're going to be talking about the biggest story of the week, and that is the victory of Zohran Mamdani, self-described Democratic Socialist, here in New York City. He's the mayor-elect, and it is a pretty big political and cultural moment in this country. I think this election was being watched not just across the nation, but actually across the world. I have family in Lebanon who were watching this election. So that's actually kind of fascinating how big one mayoral race in this country can be, that it has like an international audience to it. So we're going to be talking a bit about that and its significance moving forward, and some of the crazy panic and meltdown on the right because of it, and on and on and on. So from that, I will hand it out over to you, Eugene.
Yeah, no, so exciting show, a lot to come up. So stick with us as we continue to move forward. Now we want to move to Gaza and other issues concerning the occupied territories of Palestine. A lot going on there, although of course a lot of the U.S. mainstream media has dropped it down. Doesn't mean that things are not still happening. We are very, very honored to be joining the show to talk about a lot of these different things and many more than what I've mentioned, I'm sure, by Mohammed Shehada, who's a Palestinian writer and analyst. Mohammed, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. Good to be back.
Well, great to have you with us here on the show. I wanted to start with something that Rania mentioned, which is sort of the ceasefire in air quotes. And I mean, obviously we're seeing Israel is continuing with, various forms of killing in all of the different ways. But another thing I want to also ask you about is this division of the Gaza Strip, which has become, de facto, but seeming de jure, the so-called yellow line. I mean, it seems that part of what's happening here is that in the midst of this transitional period, there's an attempt to majorly partition Gaza and have Israel control large parts of it as well. So just wondering your thoughts about how things are developing here in the wake of the official ceasefire declaration.
Absolutely. So the way this ceasefire came into place, it was just complete and total fraud. I've looked into the record of Arab mediators that have been meeting with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and the Arab heads of states, the leaders of those governments, are saying very explicitly that it was all about the Nobel Peace Prize, nothing more, literally. So one Arab mediator is saying, quote, Trump wanted the Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't care about the price of getting it. He wanted it before Friday because of the nomination. Steve Witkoff was panicking, desperate to get it before the deadline, convinced that he can go to Trump and say, I brought you the Nobel Peace Prize. So that was all of it. The only reason that the ceasefire was sustained despite Trump not getting the prize that he wanted so badly is because of the positive media attention that he's been getting for this. He's been showered by love and praise by the entire mainstream media, left and right, and he wants to sustain this. And it's all up in the air. Trump literally holds a green button that he can just push at any moment and let Netanyahu get loose again in Gaza with the genocide. In the meanwhile, what you see with Israel is Trump holding Netanyahu with a leash around the neck, but it's a very loose one. So it allows Netanyahu to do whatever he wants in Gaza as long as he does not officially collapse the ceasefire. So you see basically the IDF killing over 250 people during the ceasefire. You see them not allowing food to go in as requested or stipulated in the Trump agreement, not allowing any reconstruction, not opening the Rafah border crossing for people to go in or out, not even allowing tents into Gaza. My phone keeps ringing with messages, desperate pleas from family, colleagues, and loved ones on the ground, just simply asking for a tent, for a place to sleep the night. And Israel is not allowing it. And the two most dangerous elements of that facade of a ceasefire is what you mentioned with the division of Gaza, where you currently have Gaza being cut in two. The IDF is controlling a fully depopulated area that constitutes over 58% of Gaza's area, and it keeps expanding. They keep pushing more and more and squeezing people in Gaza, 2 million people, into an area that is less than 42% of what Gaza used to be, and it keeps shrinking more and more. And it's divided by an invisible yellow line, and that yellow line is deadlier than the Berlin Wall. So if any Gazan want to cross from West Gaza to East Gaza, that's the terminology currently being used, the IDF is authorized to shoot to kill immediately, even if they cross a line that they cannot see with their own eyes. There was a debate in the Israeli government about what do we do when children come in close proximity to that line. And it was a specific question. It was about children with donkeys. And an Israeli minister started yelling immediately, shoot them, shoot them, shoot to kill. That was Itamar Ben-Gvir. Another Israeli minister, Dudi Salem, he responded saying, who should we shoot first, the donkey or the child? It was that technical, that level of depth in that discussion of murder. And then you have behind that yellow line, the other dangerous idea is Israel gets its way to do whatever it wants there. So they are continuing the genocide in that 58%. What that entails is systematic demolition of every single home that is left there. So I have friends and family that are living in a close proximity to East Gaza, where the IDF is stationed. And they say that the explosions, the sound of bulldozers is nonstop. They hear it all day long. And that destruction is in the very area where Israel is supposed to build now what is called New Rafah. So New Rafah is this Potemkin village. If you've ever read Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale, it's exactly the same idea of New Bethlehem, a facade that is supposed to give a pretense of what is not. And the thing about this New Rafah, it's supposed to be a concentration camp in the very south of Gaza on the Egyptian borders, where Israel will pretend that, okay, we are allowing reconstruction there, and they will use it as an excuse to prevent reconstruction in the rest of Gaza, where the actual people are living, where 2.4 million people are squeezed and bombed increasingly. So that's the depravity of it.
Mohammed, thank you for giving the rundown of the fact that there actually isn't a ceasefire in Gaza. It really, I mean, it just takes the meaning out of the word to even be calling it such a thing. But I wanted to ask you about a different aspect of what we're seeing play out, particularly among Israelis right now. And that is the fact that this week, a story that went almost entirely ignored by the mainstream media in the West was that the Israeli soldiers who had gang raped a Palestinian detainee, and it was on video and it was leaked to the media last year, I believe, those soldiers held a press conference declaring, "We will prevail." We have some B-roll up right now of that press conference. They have their faces covered to protect their identities. But in that press conference, they were proudly declaring, "We will prevail." And that's happening as the Netanyahu administration is going after the Israeli military leader, a woman who is actually currently being placed under detention on charges of obstructing the investigation because she had been the one, I believe, who leaked the video. So they're actually going after the person who leaked this video, who's in the Israeli military right now. And it's just incredible. You don't see this covered at all in the media. It's like it's a non-story. So I'm curious if you can give us some background on what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. So since October 7th, even before, it was usually a mark of honor for a Palestinian to have sacrificed and spent time in prison. It was seen as a mark of heroism, that you sacrificed a part of you for the cause, that you were tortured or beaten up or imprisoned by the Israelis. And then Israel realized, okay, how do we create shame instead of this spirit of sacrifice? And they started to resort to sexual violence, to rape. And it's been a systematic, methodical Israeli procedure for decades. But since October 7th, it went completely out of control, to the extent that the United Nations said explicitly in its report in the Independent Commission, part of the UN Human Rights Council, they said that Israel's systematic sexual assault against Palestinians have become a matter of procedure and policy. And it is instructed by the highest level of authority, civilian government and the military. You have cases where Israeli female officers would literally instruct the soldiers before her eyes on how to rape a Palestinian in prison.
Wow.
And those cases were documented in passing. They were buried underneath about 3,000 words in a New York Times article last year. If you look at the article, in the very, very bottom of it, you see a couple of testimonials about a United Nations employee and a nurse and a doctor being raped that way. And it just slipped through. No big fuss was made about it. With this incident, what was different this time is that those soldiers, they raped a Palestinian on camera. And the Palestinian was raped so violently that his intestines exploded. His rectum was ruptured, so he needed to be hospitalized. And Israeli doctors are completely complicit. They would always bury this no matter what. But an Israeli doctor assumed that it was a fellow Palestinian prisoner that raped this victim. And that's the only reason, and I mean this, the only reason why he leaked it, why he reported it officially. So now you had a video footage and a medical report, a detailed medical report. And once that medical report came out, the doctors realized it's our soldiers that did it. So they tried everything to deny it. They said that that prisoner was raping himself. The Palestinian hostage was raping himself. Although every person in that concentration camp, it's called Sdeit Ayman. It's literally a torture camp per the Israeli human rights organization's B'Tselem's description. They call it a torture camp. And in that torture camp, every Palestinian hostage is blindfolded, handcuffed, and bound by the legs 24/7. So they said he raped himself. And then another doctor said, no, he attacked the guards, he attacked the soldiers. And that's why they had to react and restrain him. So they come up with all sorts of arguments to deny that it ever happened. And there you had the Israeli military prosecutor leaking the video. I don't think that it's even her that leaked it. It's someone in the division. But she realized that she was going to leave her position either way because she came under heavy fire for daring to create a sham investigation against those soldiers. Because the only reason why she opened an investigation against the rapists is because the story got in the media. It was in the public domain already. And she was worried that if she does not open a pretend investigation, the International Criminal Court would intervene because the ICC is bound by the principle of complementarity, that in states or in countries where the government fails to launch an authentic investigation, the ICC would take over and have a mandate. So she tried to block them by running a sham investigation. As soon as she got into trouble, she took responsibility for the leak and even attempted suicide. She left a suicide note, drove off with her car, and now she's been in detention ever since. Meanwhile, the rapists are still completely at large. None of them have ever been sentenced. None of them is in jail. The victim, his testimony was never taken. You saw overwhelming support from the Israeli public for those 5 rapists. Even the spouses, some of them are married. And I read Israeli newspapers daily, 16 of them, every single one of them, 2 hours in the morning, 2 in the evening. And the spouses of the rapists are defending them on record. They say, our partners were defending the honor of Israel. They were maintaining the legacy of Israel. It's a matter of pride. You had Israeli religious leaders, rabbis, blessing those rapists on TV. You had Israeli national television hosting them. You even had Israeli members of Knesset, like Congress people, storming the military base where those rapists were held to try to break them out. And then you had ministers, and you had members of Knesset, and you had government leaders all coming in support of the rapists. So now, what happened to the victim himself? Israel was extremely cynical about it. They kept holding him hostage indefinitely with the pretext that we need him to stay here in order to give his testimony. He was never charged. He was never put on trial. He's just held hostage indefinitely just to give a testimony that never happened. And then by October this year, as soon as the ceasefire takes place, Israel dumps him into Gaza. And the only reason they set him free is so that he wouldn't be able to give a testimony, so the case would collapse. So in the Israeli media now, they are already saying that this case is collapsing apart. I think today I read in some Israeli newspaper that the case has been frozen against the rapists, pending a decision from the Israeli Supreme Court. And the rape victim is living now in Gaza terrified, fearing for his life. And he understands that at any moment Israel can bomb him. And I've been in like technical debates with fellow journalists, with experts, with human rights defenders on whether or not it would make sense for the victim to come forward and give a testimony. Because if he testifies in front of a camera, it might make it more difficult for Israel to kill him because he's already given the testimony. But I've heard opinions to the opposite of people saying if he comes in front of a camera, that would highlight him as a greater target. He would become the next Palestinian journalist, 250 of them that are killed in front of their cameras, so that nobody would bother. There wouldn't be that heavy backlash against Israel. And I'm in this very confused area. How do you deal with this situation? You know that a rape victim is living in fear, in the shadows. The rapists are at large. They're bragging in front of cameras. And you don't know which decision is the one that can save his life. You know that his minutes are numbered.
You know, yeah, I mean, I don't know what else can you really say about that. I mean, obviously, just the ongoing reality of Israeli terrorism day in and day out in many different ways. And obviously, of course, what we've seen over the past couple of years, the international reputation of Israel has, you know, essentially is in tatters at this point. There are some celebrations from Steve Witkoff and others today that a new country is joining the Abraham Accords, Kazakhstan, and, you know, no disrespect to Kazakhstan. But I mean, they already had relations with Israel, so I'm not even 100% sure what this means. But it just sort of feels like a true desperation attempt here to do anything possible to make it seem that Israel is not isolated internationally when clearly they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have Kazakhstan already having had a diplomatic relationship with the Israelis since 1992. So it's over 30 years. And they have embassies, and they have a chamber of commerce, and they have bilateral trade relations. They have it all. And then now they just pretend that there's another country joining the Abraham Accords because Saudi Arabia is saying no, and Indonesia is saying no, and all of those big countries that Witkoff has promised his boss are saying no. And Witkoff's mentality, you have to understand, his mentality is, how do I please Trump? That's the basic function from which he starts his work every day. That's what Arab mediators are saying about him. He basically, like an Arab mediator is saying, quote, those are a bunch of businessmen who think the country is their company and they run it through their offices, not through institutions. And then he says they are impulsive, unaccountable, convinced that intuition and spectacle substitute for policy. They start, they hit a wall, and then they change direction. They don't learn, they just pivot to the next headline. That's the way they function. But with Kazakhstan, what you see there is like this ultimate Borat moment where you have Kazakhstani Borat, the president there, a dictator, and Israel's own Borat, Netanyahu, or the government. Like every time you hear an Israeli spokesperson speak in front of a camera, he sounds convincingly like a Borat character. I once described the spokesperson, the top spokesperson of the IDF, Daniel Hagari, as a Borat, and I got a message from an Israeli in my DMs saying, you're my enemy, I don't agree with you on anything at all, but this was hilarious. The guy does sound like a Borat. And you have those two Borats now just pretending that there is peace and love. It's just a distraction. Israel is very desperate at this moment because its diplomatic capital has been squandered. It is living in isolation. You're seeing it at the moment with Israeli headlines every day. So a few days ago, there was a resolution in the European Parliament in which they talked about making the visa entry exemption dependent on countries' human rights record. And then there was a panic attack in Israeli media. The headline in Israel Hayom, we're not going to be able to visit Europe because of our human rights record. They understand, like, the European Parliament resolution did not mention Israel at all. It's like just someone saying murderers are actually horrible. And then Israelis are like, why are you talking about us? It's the same that you saw with the Superman movie. You saw someone trying to kill a child, and then the Israelis' first instinct was, oh, this movie is about us. This is like looking in a mirror. It's like beyond caricaturial at this stage.
Well, a lot to continue to cover, and we appreciate you joining us and helping us sort through it all, and we'll keep pushing forward. Mohammed Shehada, thanks so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of Israel's reputational downfall, the fact that this Kazakhstan Abraham Accords puppeteering was done as a way to try to normalize the idea of Israel in a world that hates it. I think the world hates Israel more than the YouTube algorithm hates us. It's interesting because it's not just in the typical places that you would find that. I mean, there is definitely a fissure on the right wing in this country that has been taking place for some time. It wasn't right after October 7th, but maybe like after the Holocaust we've witnessed in Gaza was kind of getting to its peak, and it was being live streamed. Some people on the right were really grossed out by that and really horrified by that. And I think that's mixed in with some right-wing attitudes that are problematic. But also I think, probably people on, anybody who's a human being is horrified by dead and amputated babies on their phone screens. But all that's to say, you have the Tucker Carlsons, and Tucker Carlson has become a very outspoken, prominent figure when it comes to the issue of Israel. Mm-hmm. You have Candace Owens, another right-wing figure who has a massive following, who's really turned in many ways on the Republican Party that helped boost her, turned on against Trump because of the issue of Israel. It's like pretty much when she's not talking about Brigitte Macron, saying that Brigitte Macron's a man, she's talking about Israel being like this demonic country that's committing a Holocaust. And then you've got, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's really pushing this idea that, we're America first, not Israel first. And a lot of this has been trickling down. And so I want to show a few clips that I'm sure some of you may have seen that kind of give an idea of what we're seeing. And I think it's really important to engage with this and talk about what it represents so that we understand what's actually taking place here. So I've got one Tucker Carlson clip that I'd like you to play. John, please, the first one, clip one.
Well, I've lost so many friends. I've lost a lot of friends. And particularly in the Israel question, I've never talked about Israel. I'm not a hater of Israel. Certainly not a hater of Jews. Always had a million Jewish friends. I still do have some. But Netanyahu is really hurting the United States and the world. It's completely out of control. And I have, for years not said anything about it. I've thought that for a very long time, over 20 years, 25 years. And so I've always had that view, but I've kept it to myself because it's not worth it. But we've been pushed so hard and used so much by him that it's just terrible for the country that I grew up in. And so I've said something, and you do that, and people you really had dinner with and really liked are all of a sudden denouncing you as a Nazi or whatever. And I never wanted that, and it makes me sad now.
So I love that he said in that clip that he's felt this way for really 25 years, but it just wasn't worth saying anything until for some reason now. But we're going to come back to the Tucker issue because it really plays into the issue of Candace Owens as well. So I want to play that clip number 2 of Candace Owens to get an idea of the rhetoric we're talking about here.
Why aren't you supporting Israel? I would literally rather saw off my own foot than support Israel ever again, by the way. Never supporting that demonic nation ever again. The problem that Zionists are having is that you are defending evil. You are behaving like psychopaths, and it's caught up. You are pretending that people are not starving in Gaza. You are outright mocking at points, Zionists like Randy Fine in Congress, images of children that are starving, saying that they deserve that. And you can only behave like a sadistic, psychopathic, murderous individual for so long before the world takes notice. And to do this under the context of Holy Land, we are chosen by whom? Satan? That's the only thing that makes you have to be chosen by Satan to be doing what you're doing, and then to look at us and go, we're the victims.
So it's interesting. I'm going to give you my take on this, and I want to hear what you have to say on it. And there's other clips I'd like to play if we have time. But, I think that with the issue of Candace Owens specifically, look, I don't know what's in these people's hearts. I think she was at the unveiling of the embassy, I think, when Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem during his first administration. So she's really done a 180. And I think she's somebody who actually is really, really, really horrified by what she's seeing, but she's also a Christian nationalist. So she's horrified by what she's seeing as a human being. And I think you can see it in what she was saying there. She's like, this is psychopathic behavior. They're killing people. They're murdering people. She calls it a Holocaust repeatedly. And she really just feels disgusted by being lied to, as she felt she was lied to. I think some of that's really sincere. It might be with Tucker. I don't know. I mean, when he said something like 25 years, I didn't say anything till now. I'm wondering what's going on there. But all that's to say, I think we need to be careful in the sense that these people also have attitudes that are still adamantly opposed to the vision we have for the world. I think it's great that the right wing is arguing about Israel. I think it's fantastic that this fissure is taking place, because at the end of the day, it ruins the most important base of support that Israel has left in this country. And it is trickling down. That said, we have to be very, very cautious of embracing these people. And that's what I'm seeing happen. I'm seeing a lot of embrace of these people, because I really want you to think about what their views are on other things. Tucker Carlson's, I think he pretty much supports the deportations. He is a right-wing figure. Candace Owens, I think, is pretty much a Christian nationalist. And a lot of what they're saying is actually infused increasingly with this anti-Jewish attitude that I personally don't want to be associated with, because I don't believe in that. But all that's to say, I can see why people are struggling, because at the same time, Eugene, I want to play, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. I want to play the clip 4 of Marjorie Taylor Greene, because at the same time, you also have people in office. I mean, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are 2 very popular media figures. Then you have someone like Congressional Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want to play a clip of her, and I'm going to say what I think on that.
At the same time, the relentless bombing of the Palestinian people, and many of them have been just innocent people. They're not Hamas. They're literally women and children, and you can't unsee the amount of pictures and videos of children that have been blown to pieces and are they're finding them dead in the rubble. Those aren't actors. That isn't fake war propaganda. It's very real. And I think that is equally horrific. I want to see an end to it, and I think most Americans do.
So there you have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying something that she's been going on. She's really been against what's happening in Gaza, talking about, but she always is saying Israel's killing Christians in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen to what she's actually saying. But she's also horrified about what's going on in the West Bank, and that's all fine. Good, please speak out against that. That's great. However, I think also it's why aren't Democrats saying this? That's the other thing is they're ceding the ground to these people, and then you're going to be able to see people like MTG bring people into her fold when look what she has to say about other things. She's all about the crackdown on Antifa. And the crackdown on Antifa isn't really a crackdown on whatever Antifa means. It's a crackdown on the general left, which is the base of the movement for Palestinian rights. So it's you can't really win with that. So anyways, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the comments themselves, there's the saying goes, even a stopwatch is right twice a day. So in the context of something that's just so obviously morally reprehensible, it is not surprising to me that across the political spectrum, all sorts of people are recognizing this clear moral stain on the world and are saying this is wrong and this is bad. But I also think there's multiple elements to it. I mean, one, I gotta be honest with you, I'm not really that impressed with the divisions on the right that everyone is talking about, because America keeps shipping weapons to Israel. In September of this year, they said they're gonna send $6 billion, and I didn't hear any of these people say I'm withdrawing all my support from Trump. And in fact, when you look at a lot of what they say, Marjorie Taylor Greene especially, she'll say all these criticisms and be like, I'm 100% for Trump, and I'm America first, and I'm for this, and I'm for that. And obviously you had Tucker Carlson, same thing, and so it's they're saying they're against this, and they're saying they'd like to see things change, but they're not putting themselves in a position where they're saying this is going to be a red line for me, like many people did with the Democratic Party in 2024, and said, under no circumstances can I support Joe Biden and or Kamala Harris because of what's going on with the genocide. I'm just not going to support that, even though I've been a lifelong Democrat. So if they feel so strongly, I'm just a little surprised that there's less political pushback behind it. So I guess I just say that to say that I also think, in addition to what they're saying about other issues, I think also there's a question of what are they doing as it concerns the sort of broader political structure in America? Are they using their political influence to say, withdraw your support from all these people who are doing it, especially Trump?
Well, to be fair to Candace Owens, I think she is. But again, Tucker Carlson, no.
But she's certainly still supporting Trump. I mean,
well, she's pretty much.
She's criticizing him, but But either way, it doesn't matter. The reality is that the Trump administration is continuing to do what it's going to do. The Republicans in Congress are going to do what they're going to do. I do think there's a lot of different challenges and a lot of different problems. I mean, why someone says something is important, irregardless of what they say. And I think the points you're making are correct about how a lot of this is. I don't think it's even borderline. A lot of it is obviously anti-Semitic, and it's designed to sort of generate and push that. That's why Tucker Carlson would bring Nick Fuentes onto his show. That's why at Charlie Kirk's funeral, he gave this weird thing about the people who killed Jesus and making this this reference to hummus and other things. It was just it doesn't take a lot. I mean, Candace Owens with the whole Christ is King thing, that's not about Christianity. It's not about loving Jesus Christ. Everyone knew that was what that was about when they did that whole little weekend meme of Christ is King stuff, and it certainly wasn't celebrating the Prince of Peace. So, I think a lot of these people are motivated by malign purposes, quite frankly, in terms of what they're doing. And I think that's important because the nature of how one shows solidarity with the Palestinian people is important as, a representation of their humanity and opposition to these U.S. imperialist policies around the globe and all these other pieces. And I would say that Tucker, who also holds himself as a critic of many of those policies, if you really look at the context of it, a lot of it is sometimes he'll say, oh, well, hey, in Russia, they also hate gay people. So why are we going after them?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Did you see what he said about Maduro?
He did say that, yes.
He was like, Maduro doesn't like gays. He said we can't support #global homo by regime changing Venezuela. And you're like, wait, what?
Who even knows what it's about? As if the Venezuelan opposition is all about
global
LGBTQ rights.
It's ridiculous.
So, it's and a lot of it is also about that America's not ready, right? That America's been so stretched out by all these wars, and the country is collapsing, which it is. It is overstretched by all these wars. So we need to pull back to bring ourselves, together or whatever, so that we can then at some later stage, reemerge. And that's a lot of what he's saying about Iran. So I just feel, I guess there's two different visions for the globe. And like I said, that there's stopwatches right twice a day. But to try to merge these visions as if somehow they're compatible just because there's some general overlap on issues, you end up in a very dangerous place.
I absolutely agree with you, except for one thing. I will say I do think that there is a fissure on the right that is going to be significant because it's happening in both parties. But the thing is, when the right-wing base wants something, they are eventually able to push their people in a way that the Democratic Party base has really struggled to. And I'll give you an example of what I see taking place where maybe I'm making too much of it, but I have a clip. It's clip 6, John, clip 5, excuse me, of TPUSA. You've been seeing these a lot, like with the JD Vances and the Trumps trying to take on what Charlie Kirk was doing, and their own base of young supporters who really, like, they're actually increasingly against Israel. Maybe that's coming from the same bad place that you're talking about with these others, probably is. But that said, you're seeing more of this confrontation with or against the leadership of the party they support, of the MAGA leaders. So I want to show this clip of the TPUSA. This is somebody engaging with, I believe, Donald Trump Jr. and maybe his wife, Laura.
Thank you.
Or
Mr.
Eric.
Trump.
Yeah, sorry, Eric
Mr. Trump, Ms. Trump. I'd like to ask about your father's relationship with Israel. He's taken over $230 million from pro-Israel groups. During the summer against Iran, even though he advised against it, Israel still attacked Iran and the U.S. still bombed on behalf of Israel. Your father's frustrations with Netanyahu have been made clear when he cursed on national TV over the situation. Israel has not been a great ally to the U.S. all the way since 1960 when they bombed the USS Liberty. Israel is a nation where Christians are constantly under attack in both Gaza and the West Bank. We talk about America first and defending Christians, but how can we do this if we align ourselves with a nation that does not do that itself?
So, I mean, obviously that's coming from a very, like, Christian nationalist attitude. And, that whole, the USS Liberty, something that did happen, but it's something that's always brought up by right-wingers specifically, like more than anything else Israel's done, as if it's like the worst thing Israel's ever done. But all that's to say, like, that does represent, I think, a fissure that's going to grow in that party. It's like and maybe I'm giving it more than it deserves, but I think that's going to ultimately, if I was the Israelis, and I'm dependent on, like, the Christian evangelicals, the base of the Republican Party. I've already lost the base of the Democratic Party. AIPAC is poison on that side of the aisle. I would be concerned about the fact that all these young Christian nationalists and white supremacists who I need to support me don't.
Well, if I was Israel, I'd be concerned, but as an American, I'd be concerned. I mean, to be honest with you, seeing these little TPUSA things, a lot of this is astroturfed. Like the way JD Vance, the way they jumped him, that wasn't real. The way they were saying, oh, why are you married to an Indian? Why did you marry your Vivek and then name your son Vivek? And then Nick Fuentes is like, look at that. They're taking over it. They set that up. Like a lot of this is people being set up to ask these questions to create a certain reality. I don't know about this gentleman here, but I have serious questions about how some of these things are playing out and how much it does represent people. And I guess I don't know if you're giving it too much credit. I think we're gonna have to see over time, but from my point of view, it seems that there's more criticism of Israel on the right, but that's also not unprecedented. Like the big thing that broke out this week was Pat Buchanan. And everyone was talking about Pat Buchanan and how, like, who has definitely done some anti-Semitic and very racist things. And, in 2000, Pat Buchanan was, his faction of the Republican Party was very significant. 1992 was very significant. They had to make the deal with him, George H.W. Bush, to even be able to get the nomination. And the things he was pushing at that time, talking about hanging the Central Park Five and all these things, also criticism of Israel, criticism of free trade and different things like that. And this is all coming back up because people are saying, oh, this is just like another sort of Pat Buchanan type reality. So I think a lot of this right-wing criticism of Israel is really wrapped in a very dangerous right-wing cover that is all about a lot of very, very negative beliefs as it concerns the economics and the pushing of the rich against black people, against immigrants, against others. And I don't know if it's a net positive.
Well, it's funny you say that because, Dave Smith, who gets a lot of attention for being very anti-Israel, against what Israel's doing in Gaza and against Palestinians and criticizing Zionism, and he's prominent on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's a comedian. I remember I was like, oh, this is interesting. I want to hear what this guy has to say. And so, I turned on an episode, and, on the same episode where he was going off about Zionism, and as a Jewish person, I was like, okay, that's great. He's a Jew who opposes Zionism. He then starts talking about deportations and how much he supports them, mass deportations. And I was like, oh. So we do have to be very careful, when it comes to like being taken in by somebody just because they're criticizing Israel. Because at the same time, like the right that criticizes Israel does have an agenda that is adamantly opposed to everything we believe in.
100%. I mean, listen, you go back and you listen to George Wallace running in 1968 in the presidential election and what he said when he went to Michigan. And he's ranting and raving against Wall Street and the big banks and taking on the little man and all these things that if you didn't know who he was and you dropped in from Mars, you would be like, hey, yeah, like that's kind of like right on because working class people are getting crushed. And then you realize it's all in the service of pushing an agenda of extreme racism, segregation, and many other, terrible things. And I think a similar thing is happening now. It actually started with Trump himself in 2016, saying that he was for the working class with MAGA. These people are not for the working class. They're giving trillions of dollars to the richest people. They're doing everything possible to eliminate every regulation, and they're all for that. And then they say, oh, but I'm also against what they're doing in Gaza. But, I think you should take that with a grain of salt in and of itself. But either way, more to say.
Yeah, speaking of Israel and the right wing.
Indeed. And the crackdown they're trying to push on. I mean, we're seeing it on multiple different levels. People being attacked for speaking out against Palestine, for allegedly being affiliated with any number of people around the world. Just a big crackdown on free speech, the right to organize, the right to invite whoever you want to speak to your group here from outside of the country. Anyway, the case of Sami Hamdi, who is still in ICE detention, is an important one as we continue this conversation. So we're happy to be joined by Zahra Billoo, who is the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thank you so much for being with us, Zahra.
Thanks for having me.
Well, break this down for us. I think some people had maybe heard a little bit about Sami Hamdi's case just because, Laura Loomer and others were really trying to push and say, get this guy out of the country, da-da-da-da. But I think it then, kind of fell out of the headlines very quick. So give us a sense of what's happening here.
Sure. So about 10 days ago, Sami Hamdi, and for those who don't know him, internationally renowned political analyst, British journalist, has toured the United States and the world, has spoken at Ivy League universities, major corporations, major media outlets, and at one point was even advising the State Department. He's traveling between events. He is in Northern California. He enters the United States on a valid visa. He's entered. He's here. He's going from one of our events, CARES events in Sacramento, to a CARE event in Tampa, Florida. So a journalist traveling between civil rights events. He gets dropped off at San Francisco International Airport on a Sunday morning. And after going through TSA, he is picked up by ICE agents. He is told at that time that he is out of status. His visa had been revoked 2 days ago. That was the first time he'd heard of it. And you would think, well, they're at the airport, so send him home, book him a nice British Airways flight. We'll see you if we ever have another president again. No, he is detained, taken into custody, processed at ICE in San Francisco, and within hours, put in transport to an ICE detention center, a privately run ICE detention center in Southern California, where he has been now for going on more than 10 days. The government has said a number of things online, accused him of various things, but there's nothing in the documents. They haven't actually gone to the court or the immigration judge and said anything. Now, layers of disturbing here. Imagine being suddenly picked up, you're here on a valid visa, and all of a sudden you're in custody, you're detained. Laura Loomer was the first person to break the news. So 2 days prior, her and Amy Meckelberg are on X, and they're talking about how much they don't like Sami Hamdi, and they've reported him to the government. Sami was detained, and the first person to break the news was Laura Loomer. How? Who's her source? What happened? Who was she talking to? It's as though, well, we know, but now we're seeing it in their actions, that the United States government is weaponizing immigration law to punish First Amendment protected speech. And they are doing it at the request of right-wing online activists.
The story is so insane. So you have these far right, in my case, mentally ill, right-wingers who have the ear of people in the Trump administration, basically getting someone's visa revoked. I mean, that's looks like what happened here. Laura Loomer does have that sort of power. This reminds me, of course, of what we saw happen with a lot of these student visas, where they were revoking the visas and then saying, oh, you're here unlawfully, before they'd even know, and then they'd put them in ICE detention. So there's two things I want to ask you about. One, you have the issue of right now, CARE is trying to stop legally the federal government or the ICE from moving him out of California, because right now they're trying to transfer him. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there? Again, this reminds me of what we saw happen with the student activist, or it's not even student activists in some cases, just students who exist and are foreign to this country, being detained and then transferred to like Louisiana, where the judges were seen as being potentially more sympathetic to the government's arguments. So we're seeing that play out here, but this guy's also British. Sami Hamdi is a British citizen. So I'm also curious, this is a two-pronged question. Can you talk about this attempted transfer? And then two, is the British government doing anything to try to help their citizen in this case?
Great questions. So you're right. One of the things we saw in a number of the early cases, Badr Khan Suri, Mahmoud Khalil, Rumeysa Öztürk, is that they were picked up and within 24 hours taken across state lines, in some cases to multiple detention facilities. The other facilities in other states are worse than California facilities. Not that any detention facility is ever nice, but worse than other detention facilities. They are in front of judges that are more favorable to the government. And by the way, the transport is also terrifying. Like, these are not like comfortable economy class tickets. Like, you are going at the government's behest, and you don't know where you're going. So when Sami was first picked up on Sunday, we had the opportunity to visit him on Monday, and on Monday we were concerned that the government would move him without notice. We have a really great legal team that includes Hassan Ahmed in Virginia, Muslim Legal Fund in Texas, but also CARE California, where we have over 100 staff. And so we want to keep him in proximity to the majority of his legal team. We want to keep him in proximity to the people he was visiting when he was first detained. And we want to protect him from a transport to a circuit that is less favorable to him and more deferential to the government. So we filed an emergency motion with the court. We said, stop the government from moving our client. And a couple of days later, the court responded favorably. The court agreed that we had raised serious First Amendment issues. In other words, that there was a real question of whether or not Sami was being targeted for his protected speech. And the court ordered the government not to move Sami. Now, the government is arguing back and saying they should be able to move and this is their decision and the court doesn't have jurisdiction. And so yesterday we went back to the court and we said, no, the court has jurisdiction. And by the way, the government saying that this is all just a standard visa overstay doesn't match what they are saying on X. We were writing a brief yesterday to respond, to file it with the court, and simultaneously the Department of Homeland Security's official account was slandering Sami on X. And so how is it one thing to the court and another thing on social media? Your other question was, he's a British national. You're right. Like, that's what is so jarring about this, that if they could do this to someone with the global platform that Sami has, with British citizenship, what are they doing to the hundreds and actually thousands of detainees that are invisible to us? The detention facility that Sami is at, just one of many now, has hundreds of other detainees. Nobody knows their names. They don't have high-powered legal teams. They're not on this show, right? And so this is what they're doing to a British national. And so we have been in contact with the British consulate, and they have been advocating for Sami, but they are up against the Trump administration and this new wave of ICE wants to deport everyone. And across the pond, I will say that there are a number of independent MPs who have been raising their voices on behalf of Sami. His family is very engaged in the process. And for us, this is an international issue. If we would treat a journalist this way for engaging in First Amendment protected activity, none of us are safe.
No, I think it's a very good point. And you know, even just the nature of what's happening and the crackdown in this country, and Laura Loomer being involved, I mean, she's one figure, but it feels like it represents this broader trend of, you know, essentially, maybe I'm overstating it here, but you know, people who want to make it illegal to be a Muslim in the United States of America, and if they can't be, you shouldn't be, no Muslims in Congress, which is Laura Loomer's other statement, and all these other issues, and it has such a racial element to it as well. I think even though Muslims, of course, are all races, I think we know when people are attacking Muslims, you know, the way that's coded is, you know, you either have brown skin or you're an African American, and it just feels that so much of what we see in cases like this, and when we look at the panoply of many of the things that are happening, that this is a real dangerous uptick in Islamophobia and racism and the use of the government to enforce those beliefs.
I agree with you, right? CARE has documented a 30-year high in complaints of anti-Muslim sentiment and actions and policies and all of that since the genocide in Gaza began in October 2023. The moment the genocide began, we saw that if we're going to dehumanize Palestinians elsewhere, people who are Muslim or Palestinian allied are going to be impacted here. But I would broaden the concern. So it's not just anti-Muslim sentiment, right? Sami Hamdi is being targeted because of his speech. So it's here anti-Palestinian racism. And some of the other notable people who have been targeted, like Mohsen Mahdawi, do not identify as Muslim. And so we want to make sure that we're like really broad here, that it's not just Muslim, it's anyone who's saying anything about Palestine. And so our position on this has been that the United States government is weaponizing immigration law to put Israel first. And Sami's position on this has been that he has been advocating for America first. As a British national in the United States, what he's been saying is, why are you sending a blank check to Israel while there are people who are unhoused and can't afford healthcare or food right here? And that's the message that he believes and that we agree Laura Loomer doesn't want fellow Americans to hear, because people here are starving and people in Israel have free college and free food and free housing. And just show up and say, I have a birthright to be here, and you could plant a tree on Palestinian land. So anti-Palestinian sentiment. The other thing is authoritarianism, right? Is that the government is, and we've been working really hard to connect the dots, is that we are seeing this the most from our vantage point, targeting pro-Palestine speech. But we know that there are so many people who are living in sheer terror right now. Do I go to school? Can my kids walk alone in the streets? Do I go to work? Any call from a wrong number and you're like, oh my God, ICE is at my door. And that is the broader direction that we have to be cautious of, is that the government is wielding and weaponizing immigration law to tear apart families, immigration law to target people who are religiously unpopular or politically unpopular, or to your first point, the wrong skin color.
I mean, it's really outrageous. And I'm just curious, to those who are watching, what can they do in this type of situation, if anything, particularly in the case of Sami Hamdi?
So two things. One, to assist Sami, keep telling his story. And, we talked about how there was like an initial media storm, but then it starts to slow. And that's what happens is when we isolate people from community, right? Even big public speakers with massive platforms, people get tired. They go back to their daily lives. So whether it's Sami or any other detained person, keep telling their story, keep raising their name, keep making sure that we talk about this. There are hundreds of people in Sami's detention facility. Every single one of them is someone's relative, right? Someone's loved one. And then more broadly, we have to push our elected officials to do better, to fight back against the Trump administration. We have to be signed up for rapid response in our communities, ICE Court Watch to protect people, and take care of the people around you. Like the government's coming, and we are who keeps us safe. You should know who in your family, who in your community is vulnerable, what's their safety plan, who do they call. One of the things that is very much protecting Sami is that he could immediately call a legal team. He could immediately raise his voice through his family. Many people don't have that privilege, but we can be preventative and say, okay, if I have a neighbor that this is at risk of happening, what am I going to do to protect them? Because I don't know when it's going to happen, but I do worry that it will.
Well, Zohra, we really appreciate you joining us here on the show and helping highlight Sami's case and all the other implications that are flowing from it. And I know that's work you all do at CARE every day. So thank you so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you.
Just an insane story.
Really crazy. I mean, valid visa, invited by a civil rights organization, which is another fact about it. I mean, the government is not supposed to be able to bar citizens' right to speech, but now they're basically saying who is and who is acceptable to speak to your organizations. There's just so many, it's such a slippery slope on so many different levels, the things that they're doing. I mean, some of them not slippery slope, but just in and of itself terrible.
This is also to make,
but
also the fact that
Laura
Loomer can just have that much power.
I mean, she got the general counsel of NSA fired. I mean, it just shows like, the lunatics are running the asylum, as the old saying goes. I mean, really wild. And just like, even looking at the stuff, I mean, they're basically just saying like, this guy is a Muslim and he like gave some speeches to some groups we don't like in other countries, and so he shouldn't be allowed in the country. Not that he's done anything, not that he's dangerous, not that he, I mean, it's like just totally like, we just don't like him. And so even though other citizens do and want to hear from him, since we don't like him, he should be barred from the country. I mean, it really is wild.
It's crazy. But, speaking of Muslim immigrants,
yes.
That's a nice segue there.
Shout out to the people of Uganda.
Yes.
Great country, Uganda. Big election campaign in Uganda. We'll be covering that in the upcoming weeks. But great country, historic country, and also the home country of Zohran Mamdani.
Yes, who is the mayor-elect of New York City, the city we're in right now. So It was really interesting waking up this morning and seeing free food but it was all halal because it's now Sharia law here in New York City. No, in all seriousness, what happened this week was pretty historic, right? You have, in this political climate, I think it's so interesting when you think about a year ago when Trump became president, and then obviously, God, we're like almost 11 months into this administration. It's just one horror after one horror. And on the other side of things, you have someone like Zohran Mamdani in this political climate who's able to be elected with quite a mandate and a lot of support and a lot of excitement from a spectrum of people, some in the center, though a lot on the progressive end of the spectrum, of course, to be the next mayor of New York City. And it was a nationally and I would say internationally watched election. And Laura Loomer's upset, as well as many other right-wingers are. So I'd like to go to our first clip of that right-wing meltdown.
I'm literally in tears. I'm having a hard time keeping a straight face. Nearly 1 million New Yorkers are ready to flee the city because of Mamdani's win and becoming the next mayor.
I think this Mamdani win and his ensuing acceptance speech is, you know, the nail in the coffin for New York.
This is a socialist revolution. This is a takeover of the Democratic Party.
You have an outright Marxist who's running the capitalist capital of the world.
The communist as the mayor of the largest city in the nation.
This is an Islamic extremist.
Zohran Mamdani is without a doubt the biggest win for socialism in the history of the country.
You say, oh, this is just New York. No, it's not just New York.
Not anymore.
This
Not
could
anymore.
be coming to a city and a town near you.
Inshallah. I hope more people like Zohran Mamdani can be in positions of power in this country, because his politics are definitely a lot better than everybody else to the right of him who have positions of power. That said, I mean, he is a democratic socialist, which isn't, an out-and-out socialist. It's a bit different, and that's like more specific thing we can get to. But I think that the meltdown is real, and I understand why. Because in this country, there is no space for even a modicum of policies that could benefit the welfare of working class people. And that's the platform he ran on, right? He ran on affordability. He ran on, and these are like not radical ideas, actually. Like a raise of 2% in the tax rate for like corporations and people who make us, like, he wants to basically tax billionaires 2% higher. That's a pretty standard part of even some mainstream Democrats' platforms, actually. He wants some subsidized grocery stores, it shouldn't be a radical thing. A few free buses shouldn't be a radical thing. But we live in such a right-wing country that these policies, which, these are just like policies that actually could protect capitalism from complete like overthrow and revolution, actually, because this country's become so unequal. But these policies with slight tweaks that could benefit millions of people a little bit are causing this like panic and meltdown. And I should say, like, that was a panic and meltdown by specifically right-wing figures.
I think I saw Rick Santorum at the end there. What a blast from the past.
Right-wing, and also mixed in with so much Islamophobia and racism. It's actually quite unbelievable. But let's not forget, the Democratic Party was so against Mamdani because they're also so right-wing that they backed Andrew Cuomo, a woman who has assaulted over a dozen women sexually, to run as an independent against Mamdani because Mamdani won the Democratic primary. And they were engaging in the same sort of Islamophobia, the same sort of red baiting. And you know what? That's what I think is so significant about this election. The red baiting didn't work. The red baiting didn't work. The word socialism did not work in the financial capital of this country, full of so much wealth inequality and rich people. It didn't work to stop people from voting for this guy.
Yeah, and in a way, I'm not surprised, because the number of rich people is a very small number of people. And the appeal against Mamdani was essentially an appeal to the minority of residents of the city of New York, because the level of unaffordability of New York City is so outrageous. I mean, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and not the other day, this is actually last year, but about the New York Times like calculator thing about buying a home and how it was basically like there is no value whatsoever in buying a home in New York City because the cost is so high. You will not get the thing that most people want when you buy a home, which is the equity in the home and the ability to build wealth over time, that just like will not happen. And in fact, what you should do is just save your money and then move out of the city and buy a home somewhere else. And I just thought, it's one thing, and we're talking about renters, we're talking about working class people, but when the number one route established for middle class people to build wealth, to sort of, cement them in feeling that capitalism does something for them is no longer operative in New York City, like that should tell you how bad things have really gotten. And I think that is the Mamdani effect. And I think when you look at the context of things, we've seen multiple different polls that have said something similar, national polls going back into 2023 now, that super majorities of people feel that that things have to change massively in the US economy. We've seen the now discontinued by the Trump administration Census Bureau household pulse survey that showed every 2 weeks that 100 some odd million people were having at least a little trouble making ends meet week to week. So like almost the entire workforce is having at least a little trouble, and maybe 50 to 40 million of them at different times are having quite a bit of trouble, basically barely keeping their head above water. I think we've seen the Bernie Sanders effect. We've seen the uprising after George Floyd was killed. Like we've seen so many different examples of how angry people are. In some ways, in a like kind of funhouse mirror, Alice in Wonderland kind of way, even Trump's election speak to this, that people are so dissatisfied with the status quo that they are willing to look and to do and to see things that maybe in the past would be considered beyond the pale. Yeah. And I think that Mamdani, as you're saying, was not really saying anything radical. He was saying things that made sense. He was saying things that are obviously possible that would it wouldn't even hurt rich people. I mean, and this, you say
you still get to keep your yachts, guys.
I mean, Joe Biden wanted to increase the top tax rate about 2%. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think Joe Biden, in a way, said it best in the 2020 campaign to that famous set of donors of rich people. Nothing will fundamentally change. Like, even though I'm saying I'm going to increase taxes and do this, nothing will fundamentally change because you have so much money. $4 trillion in profit for U.S. corporations in 2024. $4 trillion in profit. $4 trillion. And they sent $1 trillion of that in dividends, basically, to other rich people who own stocks, right? So it's like there's no shortage of money. There's no shortage of income. I mean, you're living in New York City. I don't even know what the GDP is in New York City, like $1 trillion, $2 trillion. I mean, it's a huge GDP like that.
Massive, yeah.
One of the biggest industries on the planet Earth, Wall Street. So it's like none of this would make any sense. But nonetheless, I think the point you're making is correct, is that despite all of the red baiting, all of the money, all of the demonization, he still won. And this is the final thing, and I'll turn it back to you. And I think it's part of what we've been saying a lot across many shows on Breakthrough News. The sort of MAGA agenda, the right-wing agenda, the agenda that says Mamdani is too radical, those people are a minority of the country. Mm-hmm. A majority of the country feel like this is too far, which is why the Republicans got wiped out all across the board. I mean, a lot of people are talking about the Virginia and New Jersey governor, but like even in Mississippi, Republicans lost their supermajority in the state Senate. Now that might seem small to some people, but like, Republicans are so in control of Mississippi, it's inconceivable just a year ago that this could happen. In Georgia, in the Public Service Commission, and by the way, one of the biggest challenges for working families right now is the rising cost of electricity going up 6-7% year on year. The Public Service Commission in Georgia, 2 Democrats won, first statewide race that was not Senate or outside of federal office that they won in like over a decade. I mean, so you could see in all sorts of different types of races, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the governors, the mayor of New York, the people in the United States were like, look, it's too much. Like all this giving $1 trillion to rich people, cutting Medicaid, cutting the ACA, driving up the cost of everything, destroying it. Like we need something different. And I think Zohran represents in the way that Abigail Spangenberg does not represent anything different. Former CIA agent, middle of the road type person. But in a way, Abigail Spangenberg is riding Zohran's coattails. Mickey Sherrill in New Jersey is riding Zohran's coattails. I don't think people would be coming out in big ways for them if they didn't feel like this was a moment to take a stand. And I think that's why Zohran has attracted so much attention is, yes, it's New York City, but he's the most representative of this broader phenomenon happening around the country of people standing up and saying, we're taking a stand against this elite ultra right-wing agenda, and we're going to actually turn around and fight back.
And a part of that elite right-wing agenda is unconditional ongoing support for Israeli settler colonialism in U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And so that's another, I think, significant aspect of this campaign is that Zohran Mamdani I actually saw a video of him yesterday. I'm not sure when it was from, but it was him explaining what radicalized him. And he said it was the issue of Palestine. And I think there's a lot of people, like I always ask people that question, especially people on the left, right? I'm always like, what radicalized you? And what radicalizing in a good way, by the way. I mean that in a positive sense. And Palestine is like 75% of the time the thing that drew people in to their politics. And so all that's to say, he started out, he's a city council member, right?
State senator.
Sorry, state senator. And he was very outspoken on Palestine, both before October 7th and after, and against the genocide in Gaza, kept calling it a genocide despite his growth in the polls. On the debate stage, I mean, we all remember on the debate stage in the Democratic primary, when everybody was asked, it was like satire almost, what's the first place you're gonna go visit like after you get elected mayor that's outside of the country? And it was Israel, Israel, Israel. One guy said Ukraine and Israel.
Yeah, and I think someone said Jamaica, because their
I
parents are
missed
from
that.
Jamaica.
Okay, that's fair, right? And then it gets to Zohran Mamdani, and he said, I'm gonna stay right here in New York City. And everybody was like horrified. They were like, what? You're not going to go to Israel?
In
Answer
fact,
for that.
Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene brought it up on Tucker Carlson's show, and they said, how is it that this communist is the only one saying
I can tell them why, by the way.
Yeah.
But all that's to say, and then he wins. And then in the debates, Cuomo, and even on every major channel Cuomo went on, just kept hammering on Israel, Palestine. Every time some other times it would be that, oh, he's friends with Hassan Piker, who said this thing about 9/11. God, Andrew Cuomo made Hassan Piker so much more famous. And then also Andrew Cuomo got increasingly Islamophobic and laughed when somebody said, oh, imagine a Muslim's in charge the next 9/11 happens. But all that's to say, he kept calling it a genocide. He still supports BDS. And this is, I think the significance of this, especially if you're a part of the political elite in this country, is to sit there and watch as somebody can win mayor of New York in spite of their pro-Palestinian stance. Or maybe because of, right? And that's a shift in politics in this country. Because what this proved, and it doesn't mean it's the same everywhere, but what this proved is that in a city that has the second largest Jewish population in the world, many of whom did, by the way, support Zohran Mamdani.
I think amongst under 35.
Oh,
the
vast majority,
yeah.
right. But so this idea that Jews are all terrified of him, which I'll get to in a second, because that's what Jonathan Greenblatt is saying. But this demonstrated that you can win on a platform that is opposed to Zionism and supports the rights of Palestinians. And I say that because that is going to definitely change the way that lobbying is done in this country. And it's definitely got people freaking out like, oh my God, because this kind of sets a precedent. And then it'll inspire others and running in other places who won't be so scared to speak out on this issue like it's going to ruin my political career. Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, which falsely labels itself a civil rights organization, was actually an anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian hate group, went on MSNBC and said something really insane. And can we go ahead and play that clip, please, John?
That young man, and if he's 34, I can call him a young man. It won like the greatest landslide probably in New York history. I mean, certainly in recent times. And he used that moment to say that he will fight anti-Semitism in New York and stand shoulder to shoulder with his Jewish brothers and sisters.
So again, I'm going to judge him not on what he says in a speech, but on what he does over time. This morning, and I will tell you, I've gotten so many calls from Jewish New Yorkers who are alarmed. Their kid was harassed in college. Their child was bullied in K through 12. Their synagogues vandalized. So here's what ADL is doing right now. If you are a Jewish New Yorker, we have your back, and we will hold Mamdani, Mayor-elect Mamdani, accountable. Look, it's not about politics. This morning we launched a tip line at adl.org NYC. So if you are Jewish and you experience anti-Semitism where you work or where you worship or where you live, we want to know so we can track it.
Well, and
look, I tell you,
there has been anti-Semitism in New York that we've talked about time and time again. Yeah. This isn't something new because he got elected last night.
It's amazing. Jonathan Greenblatt sitting there saying, oh, it's going to be a dangerous place for Jews now. And also, like, it's just completely outrageous, the level of desperation these people are engaging in right now. Like, that's desperate. And of course, you've actually seen that there have been, and I'm not saying there are plenty of anti-Semites out there. Anti-Semitic hate incidents absolutely do take place. But there have been a number of incidences as well where the police have found out actually some Zionists basically did this to try to make like Arabs and Muslims look bad. That's happened a few times across the country. There's mainstream media reports about it. So now people are concerned that there's going to be an attempt by like someone like Jonathan Greenblatt or someone who has that, mentality to go and do something like that to like make Zohran look bad or try to push him against engaging in anything that's BDS. But all that's to say, this to me looks so desperate and behaving like that when you have even Joe Scarborough being like, whoa, just shows that like you and your ideas are so increasingly desperate and unpopular.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think obviously anyone who's followed the ADL sees that they have a double standard policy. I mean, just look at what, Jonathan Greenblatt had to say about Kevin Roberts and the whole controversy over, Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and the Heritage Foundation. I don't want to get into it, but just look into it. You can see that there's obviously a double standard there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously notable. I mean, I will say that you can win the mayoralty of New York with a pro-Palestine program to a degree, because Zohran also did some dancing around it for things that wouldn't be so popular, insofar as the Palestinian people who, have the internationally recognized right to resist, which he does not recognize and which he went out of his way to say, essentially, in order to allay, quote unquote, people's fears. The sort of smear campaign against him for not saying globalize the intifada. I mean, like, okay, anyone can say whatever they want to say, but the way the word, intifada has even been totally mischaracterized, the way the Islamic religion has been mischaracterized in many different ways, and the way Arabic words are used. I think he fed into that by saying that he's going to discourage people from using it, as if somehow you're a terrorist if you say globalize the intifada, which is what the people pressing him were saying. And that is not the case. That is not, in fact, true. And I think that we have to push back against that. And I think that's the ultimate nature of a lot of this, is I think it represents a good trend. But I think we've also seen this story before of people who talk a good game, who say they're going to do this and say they're going to do that. But at the end of the day, they're trying to do it within a system that is not going to allow them to do that. I mean, we can see that he's against he's against the billionaires, but then he leaves the billionaire heiress in charge of the NYPD, whose entire, approach to Palestinian protests has been to essentially eliminate the right to free speech in the streets of New York, arrest activists, completely ridiculously brutalize demonstrations time and time and time again. And in fact, who was brought in under Mayor Eric Adams to roll back the changes that have been made in the city of New York after the death of Eric Garner and after millions of people rose up and protested, Jessica Tisch, to prevent them from, acting like thugs on the street, and to really, this was Adams' whole thing. I'm going to really unleash the police, and she's on top of it. He, of course, was criticized for past statements he had made that were in fact true statements about the role of the NYPD. And, he stepped back and said, let's not look at that. So I think that, we'll have to wait and see what happens. I think that, he just announced today that he's got a big organization he's launching for people to fight for, the policies they want to see happen. I think that insofar as anything good does happen, it's going to be because people remain mobilized and push back and create a counterforce to the force of capital. I don't think any individual can stand up. But even in the best case scenario, many of the things people want to see are just not going to happen. And I think people have to recognize that, because you can't resolve the contradictions of capitalism within capitalism, which is not to say it's not important, but I think it is notable, because to the extent he doesn't do everything, they will then say, see, socialism failed. It was too radical. You can't do this, you can't do that. And that's not really exactly is the case at all. And I think it's important to, understand the differences here, to understand why a lot of that right-wing propaganda that will inevitably come is
also, I think this is an interesting thing, and at some point I would really love to host a sit-down debate between somebody like you, who said what you just said, and then somebody who believes in doing this, running inside the Democratic Party on a Democratic Socialist agenda and then winning. And we have seen, we saw it with basically the entire squad, right? We saw, and
also the entirety of Western Europe for 2 decades.
Yeah, Podemos, Syriza.
I mean, in the 80s, the socialists and the communists took over France. In 1978 to 1981, when Francois Mitterrand came, people thought that communism was coming to Western Europe, because the Socialist Party, of which he was the leader, and the Communist Party had something called the Common Program. Very radical. If you read it compared to anything you hear now, you'd be like, I can't even believe they won. And ultimately, because it was capitalism, it did not work out. And there were some things that were also against Mitterrand too, people trying to sabotage him and other elements like that. And so the economy goes down, there's all these other problems. He gets rid of the radical sort of leftists that were in his administration. He brings in Jacques Chirac, people remember that name, Jacques Chirac, and then turns hard to the right on so many different issues. So I think we've seen, going back to, quite frankly, if we want to be honest about it, the 1920s, many people who say they're socialists, who say we're going to get elected to office, we're going to win, and we're going to bring in all these good things. And I think many of them believe that. They want to bring in good things. I don't think they're all sellouts or bad people or whatever it may be, but you can only do so much within the system. Right. And the concessions that capitalism makes to working class people are in direct relationship to the level of uprising that working class people are engaged in that make them feel that it's necessary. And so it's not that I think it's bad for people to win these positions. And I think in the case of Zohran and others, it represents a yearning for change, which is super righteous and correct. But if you don't understand the role of the position, then you don't understand its limitations. And if you don't understand its limitations, you're going to get stuck in the same cycle of reform, reaction, and never actually solving the problems that are creating the turmoil.
So reformist versus revolutionary kind of situation. And I think that also speaks to the fact that, like, for those who do support someone like Zohran Mamdani, it's like you can't just rest after that. Yeah. It's like getting someone elected is not the end goal. It's important to get who you want elected, but it's also, like you said, this person's going to have to deal with a very entrenched power structure that's going to do everything they can. They're going to bring down the weight of the federal government with Trump, which we haven't even gotten to what Trump's going to do here. They're going to bring down the weight of the Democratic Party machine of capital to get in the way of every modest proposal this guy has, even the most modest proposal. And so he's actually said it himself. He's like, you have to keep pushing for these things, because it's like you need those people in the streets so that when you're dealing with that entrenched power structure, you can say, well, there's 1 million people outside, and they want my head if I don't raise taxes on the rich. Otherwise, I mean, if you just go home, and I was at the election night rally, the official one for Mamdani, which we live stream, which people can go check out. And I thought that, I kept putting that question to people. It's like, okay, great. Now he's elected. I see, everybody, it was a very celebratory feeling. And I have to say, I've drank the Kool-Aid a little bit. I like Zohran Mamdani. I think he's great. I'm impressed by his sharpness. I'm impressed by his ability to do hostile interviews, by his ability to debate. I like most of what he's proposing. But I also recognize the limitations you're talking about. So I asked people, all right, what happens next? And a lot of people were making the point, well, we can't do what we did when, and I'm not comparing Zohran Mamdani to Obama. But
same situation in some
but we can't do what we did when Obama was elected, which is just go home. We have to stay pushing. And so it remains to be seen, will all these people, in these various organizations, grassroots organizations across New York City that supported him, when he does something to capitulate, eventually he will. It's just what happens. He'll capitulate on this or that issue with this or that appointment. It's like we said, it's kind of like the natural outcome of the capitalist system we live under. So when that happens, are you going to hold his feet to the fire? Or are you going to sit back and be too scared to criticize him, which is what happened with Obama. It took a while for people to criticize AOC for her limitations as well. So, that remains to be seen. But I still think it's, still all the significant things we mentioned. And it also, he's going to be dealing with not just the entrenched power structure in the city of New York, in the state of New York, but on a federal level, because Donald Trump is basically going to try to coup New York City. It's like he's going to try to regime change New York City, with a lot of people helping him in the Democratic Party as well. You see these billionaires talking about, we're going to flee the city and take our capital with us. Maybe they'll do that. Maybe they won't. Maybe half of them will. I don't know. But either way, that to me sounds like sanctions.
Yeah, for sure. And look, they did it to Trump. When he announced the Liberation Day tariffs and then the economy just tanked. Yeah. That's not some just law of gravity. That's investors being we don't like this, so we're going to tank the economy until you change things. To give a right-wing example, Liz Truss, and I'm saying this because Trump is pro-capitalist. Liz Truss is pro-capitalist, and she said, let's do some really capitalist stuff with the budget, but it was too much, and so the markets, they just tanked. So they'll do whatever they want to do. And I think the other thing that's relevant about this is Trump has extraordinary power to disrupt Mamdani, but even just the existing Republican agenda is a war against cities. Because see, the thing that people forget is that the One Big Beautiful Bill was just a small part of the budget. They're actually, after the shutdown, whenever it's over, are going to go back to like the rest of the budget. And all of the things they want to cut around housing, around all these different pieces, especially around housing, will hurt New York City and every other major city in America and make it significantly more difficult, for people to be able to do positive things in the way that they want to do them. So even that in and of itself is a major challenge and one that, we'll have to continue watching. But we'll have to continue watching the whole thing. Let's see what happens here. The transition team leadership has been announced. They have the website out for resumes, so I guess we'll start to see how the administration is filled out. But I think that is going to do it for us here today.
Yeah, I just want to remind our audience that you can help support Breakthrough News by going to patreon.com/Breakthrough News, where for as little as $5 a month, you can access exclusive content as well as exclusive merch, like this very cool mug that says our logo on it and our name. Although I've never seen a black one before. I really like this one.
Well, listen, we have all sorts of things going on.
And also, sorry, I'm just messaging something to myself so I don't forget. I do that.
Perfect. That's okay.
Also, I want to remind you to please make sure you smash that like button. I mean, it's supposed to help boost us in the algorithm that hates us, but it's actually, what's crazy is that we have more likes than we do viewers right now. How does that make sense, YouTube?
Hey, listen.
You work at YouTube, please email me, Rania@breakthroughnews.org. No, it's just ridiculous. Like,
I know, I'm just saying you're going to get all sorts of emails.
I'm glad that you guys are seeing our content and your feed, obviously, that's how you're here. But so many, last week I went on like a tirade against YouTube, and I got so many people responding to me on Twitter saying that they're just not seeing our stuff in their feed. So you know what, I also want to tell you, go and click through our videos and let it play for a few minutes and then go to another one, so that actually helps boost us into your feed more, so that you're seeing more of our content. I was told that would help, because if you're skipping over stuff, it downgrades us in your feed, because we produce amazing content here at Breakthrough News, and I want people to see it. And for some reason, there's someone at YouTube who doesn't. I can't imagine why. But moreover, you can also support us in the live stream by throwing money in there. You can donate directly on YouTube. You can also donate at our website, breakthroughnews.org, where we have increasingly written content.
Yes.
So we have so much going on here. Want to be able to share it on all platforms. You can follow us at BT Newsroom on all your social media platforms. You can also go and check out after this our live stream from the official Zohran Mamdani rally, where we interviewed a lot of really, really cool guests, including some strangely centrist Democrats who were there. That was kind of funny. I was like, oh wow, this is probably the only time that me and this person will ever be interacting together like this. Yeah. But also a lot of really cool people who had interesting things to say. A good friend of the show, Jamal Bowman, he's one of my favorites. I love Jamal. He's a great guy.
Yeah, you interviewed him.
Yes, I did. So that's my spiel.
I couldn't say it better than that. I think you hit all the good points, all the important points. Thanks to all of our guests, as always. Big shout out to all of our viewers, and of course, big shout out to the whole Breakthrough News team behind the scenes that makes this show happen. For myself, for Rania, we will see you next time.
Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way.